Chapter 17 of Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy. Translated by Nathan Haskell Doyle. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Marianne Spiegel. The next morning, about 11 o'clock, Vronsky went to the station to meet his mother on the Petersburg train, and the first person he saw on the grand staircase was Oblonsky, who was expecting his sister on the same train. "Ah, your Excellency!" cried Oblonsky. "Are you expecting someone?" "My Matushka," replied Vronsky, with the smile with which people always met Oblonsky, and, after shaking hands, they mounted the staircase side by side. She was to come from Petersburg today. "I waited for you till 2 o'clock this morning. Where did you go after leaving the Shtcherbatskys'?" "Home," replied Vronsky. "To tell the truth, after such a pleasant evening at the Shtcherbatskys', I did not feel like going anywhere." "I know fiery horses by their brand, and young people who are in love by their eyes," said Stepan Arkadyevitch, in the same dramatic tone in which he had spoken to Levin the afternoon before. Vronsky smiled, as much as to say that he did not deny it, but he hastened to change the conversation. "And whom have you to meet?" he asked. "I? A very pretty woman," said Oblonsky. "Ah, indeed." "On ne sait quoi mal y pense. My sister Anna." "Ah, Madame Karenina!" exclaimed Vronsky. "Do you know her then?" "It seems to me that I do, or, no, the truth is, I don't think I do," replied Vronsky, somewhat confused. The name Karenin dimly brought to his mind a tiresome and conceited person. "But Alexey Alexandrovitch, my celebrated brother-in-law, you must know him. Everyone knows him." "That is, I know him by reputation, and by sight. I know that he is talented, learned, and rather adorable. But you know that he is not in my line," said Vronsky in English. "Yes, he is a very remarkable man, somewhat conservative, but a splendid man," replied Stepan Arkadyevitch. "A splendid man." "Well, so much the better for him," said Vronsky, smiling. "Ah, here you are!" he cried, seeing his mother's old lackey standing at the door. "Come this way," he added. Vronsky, besides experiencing the pleasure that everybody felt in seeing Stepan Arkadyevitch, had felt especially drawn to him because, in a certain way, it brought him closer to Kitty. "Well, now, what do you say to giving the diva a supper Sunday?" said he with a smile, taking him by the arm. "Certainly, I will pay my share. Oh, tell me, did you meet my friend Levin last evening?" asked Stepan Arkadyevitch. "Yes, but he went away very early." "He is a glorious young fellow," said Oblonsky, "isn't he?" "I don't know why it is," replied Vronsky, "but all the Muscovites, present company excepted," he added jestingly, "have something sharp about them. They all seem to be high-strung, fiery-tempered, as if they all wanted to make you understand." "That is true enough. There is," replied Stepan Arkadyevitch, smiling pleasantly. "Is the train on time?" asked Vronsky of an employee. "It will be here directly," replied the employee. The increasing bustle in the station, the coming and going of porters, the appearance of policemen and officials, the arrival of expectant friends, all indicated the approach of the train. Through the frosty steam, workmen could be seen passing in their soft blouses and felt boots amid the network of rails. The whistle of the coming engine was heard, and the approach of something heavy. "No," continued Stepan Arkadyevitch, who was anxious to inform Vronsky of Levin's intentions in regard to Kitty. "No, you are really unjust to my friend Levin. He is a very nervous man, and then sometimes he can be disagreeable. But, on the other hand, he can be very charming. He is such an upright, genuine nature, true gold. Last evening there were special reasons," continued Stepan Arkadyevitch, with a significant smile, and entirely forgetting his genuine sympathy, which the evening before he had felt for his old friend, and now experiencing the same sympathy for Vronsky. "Yes, there was a reason why he should have been either very happy or unhappy." Vronsky stopped short and asked point blank, "What was it?" Do you mean that he proposed yesterday evening to your sister-in-law?" "Possibly," replied Stepan Arkadyevitch. "Something like that seemed probable last evening. Yes, if he went off so early and was in such bad spirits, then it is so. He has been in love with her for so long, and I am very sorry for him." "Ah, indeed! I thought that she might, however, have aspirations for a better match," said Vronsky, and, filling out his chest, he began to walk up and down again. Then he added, "However, I don't know him. Yes, this promises to be a painful situation. That is why the majority of men prefer to consort with their Claras. There, lack of success shows that you haven't money enough. But here you stand on your own merits. But here's the train." In fact, the engine was now whistling some distance away. But in a few minutes the platform shook, and the locomotive, puffing out the steam condensed by the cold air, came rolling into the station, with the lever of the central wheel slowly and rhythmically rising and falling, and the engineer well muffled and covered with frost. Next the tender came the baggage car, still more violently shaking the platform. A dog in its cage was yelping piteously. Finally appeared the passenger cars, which jolted together as the train came to a stop. The vigorous-looking conductor sprang down from the car and whistled, and behind him came the more impatient of the travellers, an officer of the guard, straight and imperious, a nimble little merchant, gaily smiling, with his gripsack, and a muzhik with his bundle over his shoulder. Vronsky, standing near Oblonsky, watched the cars and the passengers, and completely forgot his mother. What he had just heard about Kitty caused him emotion and joy. He involuntarily straightened himself, his eyes glistened, and he felt that he had won a victory. "The Countess Vronskaya is in that compartment," said the vigorous conductor, approaching him. These words awoke him from his reverie, and brought his thoughts back to his mother and their approaching meeting. In his soul he did not respect his mother, and, without ever having confessed as much to himself, he did not love her. But his education and the usages of society in which he lived did not allow him to admit that there could not be in his relations with her the slightest want of consideration. But the more he exaggerated the bare outward forms, the less he felt in his heart that he respected or loved her. End of chapter 17. Part 1, Chapter 18 of Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy. Translated by Nathan Haskell Doyle. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Marianne Spiegel. Vronsky followed the conductor, and, as he was about to enter the railway carriage, he stood aside to allow a lady to pass him. With the instant intuition of a man of the world, he saw, by a single glance at this lady's exterior, that she belonged to the very best society. Begging her pardon, he was about to enter the door, but involuntarily he turned to give another look at the lady, not because she was very beautiful, not because of that elegance and that unassuming grace which were expressed in her whole person, but because the expression of her lovely face, as she passed, seemed to him so gentle and sweet. Just as he looked back at her, she also turned her head. Her brilliant gray eyes, looking almost black under the long lashes, rested on his face with a friendly, attentive look, as if she recognized him, and instantly she turned to seek someone in the throng. Quick as this glance was, Vronsky had time to perceive the dignified vivacity which played in her face and fluttered between her shining eyes and the scarcely perceptible smile parting her rosy lips. There seemed to be in her whole person such a superfluity of life that, in spite of her will, it expressed itself now in the lightening of her eyes, now in her smile. She demurely veiled the light in her eyes, but it shone against her will in her scarcely perceptible smile. Vronsky went into the carriage. His mother, a dried-up old lady with black eyes and little curls, screwed up her face as she looked at him with a slight smile on her thin lips. Getting up from her chair, and handing her bag to her maid, She extended her thin little hand to her son, and, pushing his head from her, kissed him on the brow. "You received my telegram? You are well? Thank the Lord." "Did you have a comfortable journey?" said the son, sitting down near her, and yet involuntarily listening to a woman's voice just outside the door. He knew that it was the voice of the lady whom he had met. "However, I don't agree with you," said the lady's voice. "It is the Petersburg way of looking at it, madame." "Not at all, but simply a woman's," was her reply. "Well, allow me to kiss your hand." "Good-bye, Ivan Petrovitch. Now look and see if my brother is here, and send him to me," said the lady at the very door, and re-entering the compartment. "Have you found your brother?" asked the Countess Vronskaya, addressing the lady. Vronsky now knew it was Karenin's wife. "Your brother is here," he said, rising. "Excuse me, I did not recognize you. But our acquaintance was so short," he added with a bow, "that you naturally did not remember me either." "Oh, yes, I did," she said. "I should have known you because your Matushka and I have been talking about you all the way." And at last she permitted the animation which had been striving to break forth to express itself in a smile. "But my brother has not come yet." "Go and call him, Alyosha," said the old countess. Vronsky went out on the platform and called, "Oblonsky, here!" But Karenin's wife did not wait for her brother. As soon as she saw him she ran lightly out of the carriage, went straight to him, and, with a gesture which struck Vronsky by its grace and energy, threw her left arm around his neck and kissed him affectionately. Vronsky could not keep his eyes from her face, and smiled, without knowing why. But, remembering that his mother was waiting for him, he went back into the carriage. "Very charming, isn't she?" said the countess, referring to Madame Karenina. "Her husband put her in my charge, and I was very glad. She and I talked together all the way. Well, and you? They say you are desperately in love. So much the better, my dear, so much the better." "I don't know what you allude to, maman," replied the son coldly. "Come, maman, let us go." At this moment Madame Karenina came back to take leave of the countess. "Well, countess, you have found your son, and I my brother," she said gaily, "and I have exhausted my whole fund of stories. I shouldn't have had anything more to talk about." "Ah, not so," said the countess, taking her hand. "I should not object to travel round the world with you. You are one of those agreeable women with whom either speech or silence is pleasant. As to your son, I beg of you, don't think about him. We must have separations in this world." Madame Karenina stood motionless, holding herself very erect, and her eyes smiled. "Anna Arkadyevna has a little boy about 8 years old," said the countess, in explanation to her son. "She has never been separated from him before, and it troubles her to leave him." "Yes, we have talked about our children all the time, the countess of her son, I of mine," said Madame Karenina, turning to Vronsky, and again the smile lighted up her face, the caressing smile which beamed upon him. "That must have been very tiresome to you," said he, instantly catching on the rebound the ball of coquetry which she had tossed him. But she evidently did not care to continue her conversation in the same tone, but turned to the old countess. "Thank you very much. I don't see where the time has gone. Good-bye, countess." "Farewell, my dear," replied the countess. "Let me kiss your pretty little face. I tell you frankly, as it is permitted an old lady, that I am in love with you." Hackneyed as this expression was, Madame Karenina evidently believed thoroughly in its sincerity, and was pleased with it. She blushed, bowed slightly, and bent her face down to the old countess's lips. Then straightening herself up, she gave her hand to Vronsky with the smile that seemed to belong as much to her eyes as to her lips. He pressed her little hand, and, as if it were something unusual, was delighted with the energetic firmness with which she frankly and fearlessly shook his hand. Madame Karenina went out with light and rapid step, carrying her rather plump person with remarkable elasticity. "Very charming," said the old lady again. Her son was of the same opinion, and again his eyes followed her graceful figure till she was out of sight, and a smile rested on his face. Through the window he saw her join her brother, take his arm, and engage him in lively conversation, evidently some subject with which Vronsky had no connection, and this seemed to him annoying. "Well, are you enjoying perfectly good health, maman?" he asked, turning to his mother. "Very well, indeed, splendid. Alexandra has been charming, and Marie has been very good. She is very interesting." And again she began to speak of what was especially interesting to her heart, the baptism of her grandson, for which she had come to Moscow, and the special favor shown her eldest by the Emperor. "And here's Lavrenty," said Vronsky, looking out of the window. "Now let us go, if you are ready." The old steward who had come with the countess now appeared at the door to report that everything was ready, and she arose to go. "Come, there are only a few people about now," said Vronsky. The maid took the bag and the little dog. The steward and a porter carried the other luggage. Vronsky offered his mother his arm, but, just as they stepped down from the carriage, a number of men with frightened faces ran hastily by them. The station master followed in his curiously colored furzuka, or uniform cap. Evidently something unusual had happened. The people who had left the train were coming back again. "What is it? What is it? Where? He was thrown down. He was crushed to death," were the exclamations heard among those hurrying by. Stepan Arkadyevitch with his sister on his arm had returned with the others, and were standing with frightened faces near the train to avoid the crush. The ladies went back into the carriage, and Vronsky with Stepan Arkadyevitch went with the crowd to learn the particulars of the accident. A train hand, either from drunkenness or because he was too closely muffled against the intense cold, had not heard the noise of a train that was backing out and had been crushed. The ladies had already learned about the accident from the steward before Vronsky and Oblonsky came back. Both of them had seen the disfigured body. Oblonsky was deeply moved. He frowned and seemed ready to shed tears. "Oh, how terrible! Ah, Anna, if you had only seen it! Oh, how horrible!" he repeated. Vronsky said nothing. His handsome face was serious, but perfectly calm. "Oh, if you had only seen it, countess," continued Stepan Arkadyevitch. "And his wife is there. It was terrible to see her. She threw herself on his body. They say he was the only support of a large family. How terrible!" "Could anything be done for her?" said Madame Karenina in an agitated whisper. Vronsky looked at her and immediately left the carriage. "I will be right back, maman," he said, turning round at the door. When he came back at the end of a few minutes, Stepan Arkadyevitch was talking with the countess about a new singer, and she was impatiently watching the door for her son. "Now let us go," said Vronsky. They all went out together, Vronsky walking ahead with his mother, Madame Karenina and her brother side by side. At the door the station master overtook them and said to Vronsky, "You have given my assistant 200 rubles. Will you kindly indicate the disposition we shall make of them?" "For his widow," said Vronsky, shrugging his shoulders. "I don't see why you should have asked me." "Did you give that?" asked Oblonsky, and pressing his sister's arm, he said, "Very kind, very kind. Glorious fellow, isn't he? My best wishes, countess." He and his sister delayed, looking for her maid. When they left the station, the Vronskys' carriage had already gone. People on all sides were talking about what had happened. "What a horrible way of dying," said a gentleman passing near them. "They say he was cut in two." "It seems to me, on the contrary," replied another, "that it was a very easy way. Death was instantaneous." "Weren't there any precautions taken?" asked a third. Madame Karenina sat down in the carriage, and Stepan Arkadyevitch noticed, with astonishment, that her lips trembled, and that she could hardly keep back the tears. "What is the matter, Anna?" he asked when they had gone a little distance. "It is an evil omen," she answered. "What nonsense!" said Stepan Arkadyevitch. "You have come, that is the main thing. You cannot imagine how much I hope from your visit." "Have you known Vronsky long?" she asked. "Yes. You know we hope that he will marry Kitty." "Really?" said Anna gently. "Well, now let us talk about yourself," she added, shaking her head as if she wanted to drive away something that troubled and pained her physically. "Let us speak about your affairs. I received your letter, and here I am." "Yes, all my hope is in you," said Stepan Arkadyevitch. "Well, then, tell me all." And Stepan Arkadyevitch began his story. When they reached the house he helped his sister from the carriage, sighed, shook hands with her, and went to the courthouse. Chapter 18. Part 1, Chapter 19 of Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy, translated by Nathan Haskell Doyle. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Marianne Spiegel. When Anna entered, Dolly was sitting in her little reception room, with a plump, light-haired lad, the image of his father, who was learning a lesson from a French reading book. The boy was reading aloud, and at the same time twisting and trying to pull from his jacket a button which was hanging loose. His mother had many times reproved him, but the plump little hand kept returning to the button. At last she had to take the button off and put it in her pocket. "Keep your hand still, Grisha," said she, and again took up the bed-quilt on which she had been long at work, and which always came handy at trying moments. She worked nervously, jerking her fingers and counting the stitches. Though she had sent word to her husband, the day before, that his sister's arrival made no difference to her, nevertheless she was ready to receive her and was waiting for her impatiently. Dolly was absorbed by her woes, absolutely swallowed up by them. She did not forget that her sister-in-law Anna was the wife of one of the most important personages in Petersburg, a Petersburg grande dame, and, owing to this fact, she did not carry out what she had said to her husband. In other words, she did not forget that her sister was coming. "After all, Anna is not to blame," she said to herself. "I know nothing about her that is not good, and our relations have always been good and friendly." To be sure, as far as she could recall the impressions made on her by the Karenins at Petersburg, their home did not seem to her entirely pleasant. There was something false in the whole manner of their family. "But why should I not receive her? Provided, only, that she does not take it into her head to console me," thought Dolly. "I know what these Christian exhortations, consolations, and justifications mean. I have gone over them all 1,000 times, and they amount to nothing." Dolly had spent these last days alone with her children. She did not care to speak to anyone about her sorrow, and under the load of it she could not talk about indifferent matters. She knew that some way or other she should have to open her heart to Anna, and at one moment the thought that she could open her heart delighted her, and then again she was angry because she must speak of her humiliations before his sister and listen to her ready-made phrases of exhortation and consolation. She had been expecting every moment to see her sister-in-law appear, and had been watching the clock, but, as often happens in such cases, she became so absorbed in her thoughts that she did not hear the doorbell. Hearing light steps and the rustling of a gown, she looked up, and involuntarily her jaded face expressed, not pleasure, but surprise. She arose and threw her arms round her sister-in-law. "Why, have you come already?" she cried, kissing her. "Dolly, how glad I am to see you." "And I am glad to see you," replied Dolly with a faint smile, and trying to read, by the expression of Anna's face, how much she knew. "She knows all," was her thought as she saw the look of compassion on her features. "Well, let us go upstairs. I will show you to your room," she went on to say, trying to postpone as long as possible the time for explanations. "Is this Grisha? Heavens, how he has grown!" said Anna, kissing him. Then, not taking her eyes from Dolly, she added with a blush, "No, please let us not go yet." She took off her handkerchief and her hat, and when it caught in the locks of her dark curly hair, she shook her head and released it. "How brilliantly happy and healthy you look," said Dolly, almost enviously. "I?" exclaimed Anna. "Ah, heavens! Tanya, is that you, the playmate of my little Seroza?" said she, speaking to a little girl who came running in. She took her by the hand and kissed her. "What a charming little girl! Charming! But you must show them all to me." She recalled not only the name, the year, and the month of each, but their characteristics and their little ailments, and Dolly could not help feeling touched. "Come, let us go and see them," said she. But Vasya is having her nap now. It's too bad." After they had seen the children, they came back to the sitting room alone for coffee. Anna drew the tray toward her, and then she pushed it away. "Dolly," she said, "he has told me." Dolly looked at Anna coldly. She now expected some expression of hypocritical sympathy, but Anna said nothing of the kind. "Dolly, my dear," she said, "I do not intend to speak to you in defense of him, nor to console you. It is impossible. But Dushenka, dear heart, I am sorry for you with all my soul." Under her long lashes her brilliant eyes suddenly filled with tears. She drew closer, and with her energetic little hand seized the hand of her sister-in-law. Dolly did not repulse her, but her face still preserved its forlorn expression. "It is impossible to console me. After what has happened, all is over for me. All is lost." And she had hardly said these words ere her face suddenly softened a little. Anna lifted to her lips the thin, dry hand that she held and kissed it. "But Dolly, what is to be done? What is to be done? What is the best way to act in this frightful condition of things? We must think about it." "All is over. Nothing can be done," Dolly replied. "And, what is worse than all, you must understand it, is that I cannot leave him. The children. I am chained to him, and I cannot live with him. It is torture to see him." "Dolly, Golubchik, he has told me. But I should like to hear your side of the story. Tell me all." Dolly looked at her with a questioning expression. Sympathy and the sincerest affection were depicted in Anna's face. "I should like to," she suddenly said, "but I shall tell you everything from the very beginning. You know how I was married. With the education that Maman gave me, I was not only innocent, I was stupid. I did not know anything. I know they said husbands told their wives about their past lives, but Stiva," she corrected herself, "Stepan Arkadyevitch never told me anything. You would not believe it, but, up to the present time, I supposed that I was the only woman with whom he was acquainted. Thus I lived 8 years. You see, I not only never suspected him of being unfaithful to me, but I believed such a thing to be impossible, and with such ideas, imagine how I suffered when I suddenly learned all this horror, all this dastardliness. Understand me. To believe absolutely in his honor," continued Dolly, struggling to keep back her sobs, "and suddenly to find a letter from him to his mistress, to the governess of my children. No, this is too cruel." She hastily took out her handkerchief and hid her face in it. "I might have been able to admit a moment of temptation," she continued after a moment's pause, "but this hypocrisy, this continual attempt to deceive me, and for whom? To continue to be my husband, and yet have her. It is frightful. You cannot comprehend." "Oh, yes, I comprehend. I comprehend, my dear Dolly," said Anna, squeezing her hand. "And do you imagine that he appreciates all the horror of my situation?" continued Dolly. "Certainly not. He is happy and contented." "Oh no," interrupted Anna warmly. "He is thoroughly repentant. He is overwhelmed with remorse." "Is he capable of remorse?" demanded Dolly, scrutinizing her sister-in-law's face. "Yes, I know him. I could not look at him without feeling sorry for him. We both of us know him. He is kind, but he is proud, and now he is so humiliated. What touched me most, Anna knew well enough that this would touch Dolly also, are the 2 things that pained him. In the first place, he was ashamed for the children, and secondly, because loving you, yes, loving you more than anyone else in the world," she added vehemently, to prevent Dolly from interrupting her, "he has wounded you grievously, has almost killed me. No, she will never forgive me, he keeps saying all the time." Dolly looked straight beyond her sister as she listened. "Yes, I understand that his position is terrible. The guilty suffers more than the innocent, if he knows that he is the cause of all the unhappiness. But how can I forgive him? How can I be his wife again after she has... For me to live with him henceforth would be torment all the more because I still love what I used to love in him. and the sobs prevented her from speaking. But as if on purpose, each time, after she had become a little calmer, she began again to speak of what hurt her most cruelly. "She is young, you see. She is pretty," she went on to say. "Do you realize, Anna, for whom I have sacrificed my youth, my beauty? For him and his children. I have worn myself out in his service. I have given him the best that I had. And now, of course, some one younger and fresher than I am is more pleasing to him. They have, certainly, discussed me between them, or, worse, have insulted me with their silence. Do you understand?" And again her jealousy flamed up in her eyes. "And after all this he will tell me? What? Could I believe it? No, never. It is all over. All that gave me recompense for my sufferings, for my sorrows. Would you believe it? Just now I was teaching Grisha. It used to be a pleasure to me. Now it is a torment. Why should I take the trouble? Why have I children? It is terrible because my whole soul is in revolt. Instead of love, tenderness, I am filled with nothing but hate. Yes, hate. I could kill him and—" "Dushenka, Dolly, I understand you, but don't torment yourself so. You are too excited, too angry, to see things in their right light." Dolly grew calmer, and for a few moments neither spoke. "What is to be done, Anna? Consider and help me. I have thought of everything, but I cannot see any way out of it." Anna herself did not see any, but her heart responded to every word, to every expression in her sister-in-law's face. "I will tell you one thing," said she at last. "I am his sister. I know his character, his peculiarity of forgetting everything." She touched her forehead. "This peculiarity of his which is so conducive to sudden temptation, but also to repentance. At the present moment, he does not understand how it was possible for him to have done what he did." "Not so!" "He understands, and he did understand," interrupted Dolly. "But you forget me. Does that make the pain less for me?" "Wait. When he made his confession to me, I acknowledged that I did not appreciate the whole horror of your position. I saw only him and the fact that the family was broken up. I was sorry for him. But now that I have been talking with you, I, as a woman, look on it in a different light. I see your suffering, and I cannot tell you how sorry I am. But Dolly, Dushenka, while I fully appreciate your misfortune, there is one thing which I do not know. I do not know to what degree you still love him. You alone can tell whether you love him enough to forgive him. If you do, then forgive him." "No," began Dolly, but Anna interrupted her, kissing her hand again. "I know the world better than you do," she said. "I know how men such as Stiva look on these things. You say they have discussed you between them. Don't you believe it. These men can be unfaithful to their marriage vows, but their homes and their wives remain no less sacred in their eyes. Between these women and their families, they draw a line of demarcation which is never crossed. I cannot understand how it can be, but it is so." "Yes, but he has kissed her." "Wait, Dolly, Dushenka. I saw Stiva when he was in love with you. I remember the time when he used to come to me and talk about you with tears in his eyes. I know to what a poetic height he raised you, and I know that the longer he lived with you the more he admired you. We always have smiled at his habit of saying at every opportunity, 'Dolly is an extraordinary woman.' You have been, and you always will be, an object of adoration in his eyes, and this passion is not a defection of his heart. But supposing this defection should be repeated? It is impossible, as I think." "Yes, but would you have forgiven him?" "I don't know. I can't say. Yes, I could," said Anna, after a moment's thought, apprehending the gravity of the situation and weighing it in her mental scales. "I could. Yes, I could forgive him, but I should not be the same. But I should forgive him, and I should forgive him in such a way as to show that the past was forgotten, absolutely forgotten. "Well, of course," interrupted Dolly, impetuously, as if she was saying what she had said many times to herself, "otherwise it would not be forgiveness. If you forgive, it must be absolutely, absolutely. Well, let me show you to your room," said she, rising and throwing her arm around her sister-in-law. "My dear, how glad I am that you came. My heart is already lighter, much lighter." Chapter 19. Part 1, Chapter 20 of Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy. Translated by Nathan Haskell Doyle. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Marianne Spiegel. Anna spent the whole day at home, that is to say, at the Oblonskys', and refused to see any callers, although some of her friends, having learned of her arrival, came to see her. The whole morning was given to Dolly and the children. She sent a note to her brother that he must dine at home. "Come, God is merciful," she wrote. Oblonsky accordingly dined at home. The conversation was general, and his wife, when she spoke to him, called him "tui," thou, which had not been the case before. The relations between husband and wife remained cool, but nothing more was said about a separation, and Stepan Arkadyevitch saw the possibility of a reconciliation. Kitty came in soon after dinner. Her acquaintance with Anna Arkadyevna was very slight, and she was not without solicitude as to the welcome which she would receive from this great Petersburg lady, whose praise was in everybody's mouth. But she made a pleasing impression on Anna Arkadyevna. This she immediately realized. Anna evidently admired her youth and beauty, and Kitty was not slow in realizing a sense of being not only under her influence, but of being in love with her, and immediately fell in love with her, as young girls often fall in love with married women older than themselves. Anna was not like a society woman, or the mother of an 8-year-old son, but, by the vivacity of movement, by the freshness and animation of her face expressed in her smile and in her eyes, she would have been taken rather for a young girl of 20, had it not been for a serious and sometimes almost melancholy look, which struck and attracted Kitty. Kitty felt that she was perfectly natural and sincere, but that there was something about her that suggested a whole world of complicated and poetic interests far beyond her comprehension. After dinner, when Dolly had gone to her room, Anna went eagerly to her brother, who was smoking a cigar. "Stiva," she said, giving him a joyous wink, making the sign of the cross and glancing toward the door. "Go, and God help you." He understood her, and, throwing away his cigar, disappeared behind the door. As soon as she had gone, Anna sat down upon a divan, surrounded by the children. Either because they saw that their mamma loved this aunt, or because they themselves felt a special attraction toward her, the two eldest, and therefore the younger, as often happens with children, had taken possession of her even before dinner, and could not leave her alone. And now they were having something like a game, in which each tried to get next to her, to hold her little hand, to kiss her, to play with her rings, or even to cling to the flounces of her gown. "There, there, let us sit as we were before," said Anna, sitting down in her place. And Grisha, proud and delighted, thrust his head under his aunt's arm, and nestled up close to her. "And when is the ball?" she asked of Kitty. "Next week. It will be a lovely ball, one of those balls where one always has a good time." "Then there are places where one always has a good time?" asked Anna in a tone of gentle irony. "Strange, but it is so. We always enjoy ourselves at the Bobrishevs' and at the Nikitins', but at the Mezkovs' it is always dull. Haven't you ever noticed that?" "No, dusha moya, no ball could be amusing to me," said Anna, and again Kitty saw in her eyes that unknown world which had not yet been revealed to her. "For me they are all more or less tiresome." "How could you find a ball tiresome?" "And why should I not find a ball tiresome?" Kitty perceived that Anna foresaw what her answer would be. "Because you are the loveliest of all." Anna blushed easily. She blushed now and said, "In the first place, that is not true, and in the second, if it were, it would not make any difference." "Won't you go to this ball?" asked Kitty. I think I would rather not go. Here, take it, she said to Tanya, who was drawing off a loose ring from her delicate white finger. I should be delighted if you would go. I should so like to see you at a ball. Well, if I have to go, I shall console myself with the thought that I am making you happy. Grisha, don't pull my hair down. It is disorderly enough now, she said, putting back the rebellious lock with which the lad was playing. I can imagine you at a ball dressed in violet. Why in violet? asked Anna, smiling. Now, children, run away. Run away. Don't you hear? Miss Hull is calling you to tea, said she, freeing herself from the children and sending them out of the dining-room. I know why you want me to go to the ball. You expect something wonderful to happen at this ball, and you are anxious for us all to be there so as to share in your happiness. How did you know? You were right. Oh, what a lovely age is yours, continued Anna. I remember well, and know this purple haze like that which you see hanging over the mountains in Switzerland. This haze covers everything in that delicious time when childhood ends, and from out of this immense circle, so joyous, so gay, grows a footpath ever narrower and narrower, and leads gaily and painfully to that labyrinth, and yet it seems so bright and so beautiful. Who has not passed through it? Kitty listened and smiled. How did she pass through it? How I should like to know the whole romance of her life, thought Kitty, remembering the unpoetic appearance of her husband, Alexey Alexandrovitch. I know a thing or two, continued Anna. Stiva told me, and I congratulate you. He pleased me very much. I met Vronsky at the station. Oh, was he there? asked Kitty, blushing. What did Stiva tell you? Stiva told me the whole story, and I should be delighted. I came from Petersburg with Vronsky's mother, she continued, and his mother never ceased to speak of him. He is her favorite. I know how partial mothers are, but... What did his mother tell you? Oh, many things, and I know that he is her favorite, but it is still evident he has a chivalrous nature. Well, for example, she told me how he wanted to give up his whole fortune to his brother, how he did something more wonderful when he was a boy, saved a woman from drowning. In a word, he is a hero, said Anna, smiling and remembering the 200 rubles which he had given at the station. But she did not tell about the 200 rubles. Somehow it was not pleasant for her to remember that. She felt that there was something in it that concerned herself too closely, and ought not to have been. The countess urged me to come to see her, continued Anna, and I should be very happy to meet her again, and I will go tomorrow. Thank the Lord, Stiva remains a long time with Dolly in the library, she added, changing the subject, and as Kitty perceived, looking a little annoyed. I'll be the first. No, I, cried the children, who had just finished their supper and came running to their Aunt Anna. All together, she said, laughing and running to meet them. She seized them and piled them in a heap, struggling and screaming with delight. End of chapter 20. Part 1, Chapter 21 of Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy. Translated by Nathan Haskell Doyle. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Marianne Spiegel. At tea time, Dolly came out of her room. Stepan Arkadyevitch was not with her. He had left his wife's chamber by the rear door. I'm afraid you will be cold upstairs, remarked Dolly, addressing Anna. I should like to have you come down and be near me. Oh, please don't worry about me, replied Anna, trying to divine by Dolly's face if there had been a reconciliation. Perhaps it would be too light for you here, said her sister-in-law. I assure you I sleep anywhere and everywhere as sound as a woodchuck. What is it? asked Stepan Arkadyevitch, coming in from his library and addressing his wife. By the tone of his voice, both Kitty and Anna knew that the reconciliation had taken place. I wanted to install Anna downstairs, but we should have to put up some curtains. No one knows how to do it, and so I must, said Dolly, in reply to her husband's question. God knows if they have wholly made it up, thought Anna, as she noticed Dolly's cold and even tone. Ugh, don't. Dolly, don't make difficulties. Well, if you like, I will fix everything. Yes, thought Anna, they must have had a reconciliation. I know how you do everything," said Dolly. "You give Matvey an order which it is impossible to carry out, and then you go away and he gets everything into a tangle." And her customary mocking smile wrinkled the corners of Dolly's lips as she said that. Complete reconciliation. Complete, thought Anna. Thank God. And rejoicing that she had been the cause of it, she went to Dolly and kissed her. "Not by any means. Why have you such scorn for Matvey and me?" said Stepan Arkadyevitch to his wife, with an almost imperceptible smile. Throughout the evening Dolly, as usual, was lightly ironical toward her husband, and Stepan Arkadyevitch was happy and gay, but within bounds, as if he wanted to make it evident that though he had obtained pardon, he had not forgotten his offense. About 9:30, a particularly animated and pleasant confidential conversation, which was going on at the tea-table, was interrupted by an incident apparently of the slightest importance, but this simple incident seemed to each member of the family to be very strange. They were talking about one of their Petersburg acquaintances when Anna suddenly arose. "I have her picture in my album," she said, "and at the same time I will show you my little Seroza," she added with a smile of maternal pride. It was usually about 10 o'clock when she bade her son good night. Often she herself put him to bed before she went out to parties, and now she felt a sensation of sadness to be so far from him. No matter what people were speaking about, her thoughts reverted always to her little curly-haired Seroza, and the desire seized her to go and look at his picture and to talk about him. Using this first pretext, she, with her light, decided step, started to fetch her album. The stairs to her room started from the landing place in the large staircase, which led from the heated hall. Just as she was leaving the drawing-room, the front door-bell rang. "Who can that be?" said Dolly. "It's too early to come after me, and it's too late for a call," remarked Kitty. "Doubtless somebody with papers for me," said Stepan Arkadyevitch. As Anna was passing the staircase she saw the servant going up to announce a caller, but the caller stood in the light of the hall lamp and was waiting. Anna glanced down and saw that it was Vronsky, and a strange sensation of joy, mixed with terror, suddenly seized her heart. He was standing with his coat on, and was taking something out of his pocket. At the same moment Anna reached the center of the staircase, he lifted his eyes and saw her, and his face assumed an expression of humility and confusion. She bowed her head slightly in salutation, and as she went on her way she heard Stepan Arkadyevitch's loud voice calling to him to come in, and then Vronsky's low, soft, tranquil voice excusing himself. When Anna reached the room with the album, he had gone, and Stepan Arkadyevitch was telling how he came to see about a dinner which they were going to give the next day in honor of some celebrity who was in town. "And nothing would induce him to come in. What a queer fellow," said Stepan Arkadyevitch. Kitty blushed. She thought that she alone understood what he had come for, and why he would not come in. "He must have been at our house," she thought, "and not finding me, have supposed that I was here. But he did not come in, because it was late, and Anna here." They all exchanged glances, but nothing was said, and they began to examine Anna's album. There was nothing extraordinary or strange in a man calling at 9:30 in the evening to inquire of a friend about the details of a proposed dinner and not coming in. Yet to everybody it seemed strange, and it seemed more strange and unpleasant to Anna than to anyone else. Chapter 21. Part 1, Chapter 22 of Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy. Translated by Nathan Haskell Doyle. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Marianne Spiegel. The ball was just beginning when Kitty and her mother mounted the grand staircase, brilliantly lighted and adorned with flowers and with powdered lackeys in red kaftans. In the ballrooms there was an incessant bustle of movement, which sounded like the humming of a beehive, and, as they stopped to give the last touches to their hair and gowns before a mirror hung on the tree-decorated landing, they heard the scraping of violins as the orchestra was tuning up for the first waltz. A little old man, a civilian, who was smoothing his white locks in another mirror, and who exhaled a penetrating odor of perfumes, brushed against them on the stairway and stood aside, evidently impressed by Kitty's youth and beauty. A beardless young man, such as the old Prince Shtcherbatsky would have reckoned among the "mashers," wearing a very low-cut waistcoat and a white necktie which he adjusted as he walked, bowed to them, and after he had passed them turned back to ask Kitty for a quadrille. The first quadrille was already promised to Vronsky, and so she was obliged to content the young man with the second. An officer buttoning his gloves was standing near the door of the ballroom. He cast a glance of admiration at the blooming Kitty and caressed his moustache. Although Kitty had taken great pains and spent much labor on her toilet, her gown, and all her preparations for this ball, yet now she entered the ballroom in her complicated robe of tulle with its rose-colored overdress, as easily and naturally as if all these rosettes and laces, all the requirements of her toilet, had not caused her or her people a moment's attention, as if she had been born in this lace-trimmed ball-dress, and with a rose and 2 ribbons placed on the top of her graceful head. When the old princess, her mother, just before they entered the ballroom, was about to readjust her broad sash ribbon, Kitty gently declined. She felt that everything about her must surely be right and graceful, and that to readjust anything about her was unnecessary. Kitty was looking her prettiest. Her gown was not too tight anywhere. Her lace fichu did not slip down, her rosettes did not crush, and did not pull off. Her rose-colored slippers with their high heels did not pinch her, but were agreeable to her feet. The thick braids of her hair kept perfectly in place on her graceful little head. All 3 buttons on her long gloves, which enveloped, without changing, the pretty shape of her hands, fastened easily and did not tear. The black velvet ribbon, attached to a medallion, was thrown daintily about her neck. This ribbon was charming, and at home, as she saw it in her mirror, adorning her neck, Kitty felt that this ribbon spoke. Everything else might be dubious, but this ribbon was charming. Kitty smiled, even there at the ball, as she saw it in the mirror. In her bare shoulders and arms Kitty felt a sensation of marble coolness, a sensation which she especially enjoyed. Her eyes shone, and her rosy lips could not refrain from smiling with the consciousness of how fascinating she was. She had scarcely entered the ballroom and joined a group of tulle, ribbon, lace, and flower-decorated ladies who were waiting for partners. Kitty never remained long in that category, when she was invited to waltz with the best dancer, the principal cavalier in the whole hierarchy of the ballroom, the celebrated leader of the mazurka, the master of ceremonies, the handsome, elegant Yegorushka Korsunsky, a married man and a civilian. He had just left the Countess Bonina, with whom he had been taking the first turns of the waltz, and, while looking round over his domain, in other words, over the few couples who were venturing out on the floor, he perceived Kitty, made his way to her in that easy manner peculiar to leaders of the mazurka, bowed, and without even asking her permission, put his arm around the young girl's slender waist. She looked for someone to whom to confide her fan, and the mistress of the mansion, smiling on her, took charge of it. "How good of you to come early," said Korsunsky, as he put his arm around her waist. "I don't like the fashion of being late." Kitty placed her left hand on her partner's shoulder, and her little feet, shod in rose-colored bashmaks, glided swiftly, lightly, and rhythmically over the polished floor. "It is restful to dance with you," said he, as he fell into the slow measures of the waltz. "Charming! Such lightness! Such precision!" That was what he said to almost all his dancing acquaintances. She smiled at his flattery, and continued to study the ballroom across her partner's shoulder. She was not such a novice in society as to find all faces blending in one magic sensation. She had not been so assiduous in her attendance at balls as to know everyone present and be tired of seeing them. But she was in that happy condition between these 2 extremes. She was exhilarated, and at the same time she was sufficiently self-possessed to be able to look around and observe. She noticed a group that had gathered in the left-hand corner of the ballroom, composed of the very flower of society. Korsunsky's wife, Lyddy, a beauty in an extremely low-cut corsage, was there. The mistress of the mansion was there. There shone Kriven's bald head, always to be seen where the flower of society was gathered. Young men were looking at this group and not venturing to join it. Then her eyes fell on Stiva, who was also there, and then she saw Anna's elegant figure dressed in black velvet. And he was there. Kitty had not seen him since the evening when she refused Levin. Kitty's eyes instantly recognized him across the room, and saw that he was looking at her. "Shall we take one more turn? You are not fatigued?" asked Korsunsky, slightly out of breath. "No, thank you." "Where shall I leave you?" "I think Madame Karenina is here. Take me to her." "Anywhere that you please." And Korsunsky, still waltzing with Kitty but with a slower step, made his way toward the group on the left, saying as he went, "Pardon, mesdames. Pardon, pardon, mesdames." And steering skillfully through the sea of laces, tulle, and ribbons, without catching a feather, placed her in a chair after a final turn, which gave a glimpse of her slender ankles in dainty blue stockings, while her train spread out like a fan and covered Krivin's knees. Korsunsky bowed, then straightened himself up and offered Kitty his arm to conduct her to Anna Arkadyevna. Kitty, blushing a little, freed Krivin from the folds of her train, and, just a trifle dizzy, looked around in search of Anna. Anna was not dressed in violet, as Kitty had hoped, but in a low-cut black velvet gown, which showed her plump shoulders and bosom smooth as ivory, her beautiful round arms, and her delicate slender wrists. Her robe was adorned with Venetian guipure. On her head, gracefully set on her dark locks, was a little garland of heart's ease, and a similar bouquet was fastened in her black ribbon belt in the midst of white lace. Her hair, which was all her own, was dressed very simply. There was nothing remarkable about it except the abundance of the little natural curls, which strayed in fascinating disorder around her neck and temples. She wore a string of pearls around her firm throat. Kitty had seen Anna every day and had fallen in love with her. But now that she saw her dressed in black, instead of the violet which she had expected, she was conscious that she had never before appreciated her full beauty. She saw her in a new and unexpected light. Now she realized that violet would not have been becoming to her, and that her charm consisted entirely of her independence of toilette. That her toilette was only an accessory, and her black gown with the magnificent laces was only an accessory, was only a frame for her, and nothing else was to be thought of but herself in all her simplicity, naturalness, elegance, and at the same time her gaiety and animation. When Kitty joined her she was standing in her usual erect attitude, talking with the master of the house, her head slightly bent toward him. "No, I would not cast the first stone, though I don't understand about it," she was saying to him, slightly shrugging her shoulders, and then perceiving Kitty she turned to her with an affectionate and reassuring smile. With a woman's quick intuition she saw all the beauty of the young girl's toilette, and gave her an appreciative nod, which Kitty understood. "You even dance into the ballroom," she said. "She is the most faithful of my aides," said Korsunsky, addressing Anna Arkadyevna, whom he had not as yet seen. "The princess helps to make any ballroom gay and delightful. Anna Arkadyevna, will you take a turn?" he asked with a bow. "Ah, you are acquainted," said the host. "Who is it we don't know? My wife and I are like white wolves. Everybody knows us," replied Korsunsky. "A little waltz, Anna Arkadyevna?" "I don't dance when I can help it," she replied. "But you can't help it tonight," said Korsunsky. At this moment Vronsky joined them. "Well, if I can't help dancing, let us dance," said she, placing her hand on Korsunsky's shoulder and not replying to Vronsky's salutation. "Why is she vexed with him?" thought Kitty, noticing that Anna purposely paid no attention to Vronsky's bow. Vronsky joined Kitty, reminded her that she was engaged to him for the first quadrille, and expressed regret that he had not seen her for so long. Kitty, while she was looking with admiration at Anna as she waltzed, listened to Vronsky. She expected that he would invite her, but he did nothing of the sort, and she looked at him with astonishment. A flush came into his face, and he hastily suggested that they should waltz, but he had scarcely put his arm around her slender waist and taken the first step, when suddenly the music stopped. Kitty looked into his face, which was close to her own, and for many a long day, even after years had passed, the loving look which she gave him, and which he did not return, tore her heart with cruel shame. "Pardon, pardon! A waltz, a waltz!" cried Korsunsky at the other end of the ballroom, and, seizing the first young lady at hand, he began once more to dance. Chapter 22. Part 1, Chapter 23 of Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy. Translated by Nathan Haskell Doyle. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Marianne Spiegel. Vronsky took a few turns with Kitty. Then she joined her mother. But she had time for only a few words with the Countess Nordstone, ere Vronsky came back to get her for the first quadrille. During the quadrille nothing of importance was said. Their conversation was first on Korsunsky and his wife, whom Vronsky described very amusingly as amiable children of 40 years, then on some private theatricals, and only once did his words give her a keen pang, when he asked if Levin were there, and added that he liked him very much. But Kitty counted little on the quadrille. She waited for the mazurka with a violent beating of the heart. She had a feeling that during the mazurka all would surely be settled. The fact that Vronsky did not ask her during the quadrille did not disturb her. She felt sure that she should be selected as his partner for the mazurka, as in all preceding balls, and she refused 5 invitations, saying that she was engaged. This whole ball, even to the last quadrille, seemed to Kitty like a magical dream, full of flowers, of joyous sounds, of movement. She did not cease to dance until her strength began to fail, and then she begged to rest a moment. But in dancing the last quadrille with one of those tiresome men whom she found it impossible to refuse, she found herself in the same set with Vronsky and Anna. Kitty had not fallen in with Anna since the beginning of the ball, and now again she suddenly saw her in another new and unexpected light. She seemed laboring under an excitement such as Kitty herself had experienced, that of success. She saw that Anna was excited and intoxicated with the wine of admiration. Kitty knew the sensation, knew the symptoms, and recognized them in Anna. She saw the feverish brilliancy of her, and the smile of happiness and excitement involuntarily parting her lips, and the harmony, precision, and grace of her movements. Who has caused it? She asked herself. All or one? She could not help her tormented partner in the conversation, the thread of which he had dropped and could not pick up again. And though she submitted with apparent good grace to the loud orders of Korsunsky, shouting "Ladies' chain" and "All hands around," she watched her closely, and her heart oppressed her more and more. No, it is not the approval of the crowd that has so intoxicated her, but the admiration of the one. And that one? Can it be he? Every time Vronsky spoke to Anna her eyes sparkled with pleasure, and a smile of happiness parted her rosy lips. She seemed to make an effort not to exhibit any signs of this joy, but nevertheless happiness was painted on her face. Can it be he? Thought Kitty. She looked at him, and was horror-struck. The sentiments that were reflected on Anna's face as in a mirror were also visible on his. Where were his coolness, his calm dignity, the repose which always marked his face? Now, as he addressed his partner, his head bent as if he were ready to worship her, and his look expressed at once humility and passion, as if it said, "I would not offend you. I would save myself, and how can I?" Such was the expression of his face, and she had never before seen it in him. They talked about their mutual acquaintances, their conversation was made up of trifles, and yet Kitty felt that every word they spoke decided her fate. Strange as it might seem, although they really remarked how ridiculous Ivan Ivanovitch was in his efforts to speak French, and how Miss Fletskaya might have found a better match, nevertheless these words had for them a peculiar meaning, and they understood it just as well as Kitty did. In Kitty's mind, the whole ball, the whole evening, everything seemed enveloped in mist. Only the stern school of her education, serving her well, sustained her, and enabled her to do what was required of her, that is to say, to dance, to answer questions, to talk, even to smile. But even before the mazurka began, while they were arranging the chairs and a few couples were already starting to go from the smaller rooms to the great ballroom, a sudden attack of despair and terror seized her. She had refused 5 invitations, and now she had no partner, and there was no hope at all that she would be invited again, for the very reason that her social success would make it unlikely to occur to anyone that she would be without a partner. She would have to tell her mother that she was not feeling well, and go home, but even this seemed impossible. She felt overwhelmed. She went into the farthest end of a small parlour, and threw herself into an armchair. The airy skirts of her robe enveloped her delicate figure as in a cloud. One bare arm, as yet a little thin, but pretty, fell without energy, and lay in the folds of her rose-coloured skirt. With the other she held her fan, and with quick, sharp motions tried to cool her heated face. But while she looked like a lovely butterfly caught amid grasses, and ready to spread its rainbow-tinted wings, a horrible despair oppressed her heart. "But perhaps I am mistaken. Perhaps it is not so." And again she recalled what she had seen. "Kitty, what does this mean?" said the Countess Nordston, coming up to her with noiseless steps. Kitty's lower lip quivered. She hastily rose. "Kitty, aren't you dancing the mazurka?" "No, no," she replied with a trembling voice, almost in tears. "I heard him invite her for the mazurka," said the countess, knowing that Kitty would know whom she meant. She said, "What, aren't you going to dance with the Princess Shtcherbatskaya?" "Oh, it's all one to me," said Kitty. No one besides herself realized her position. No one knew that she had refused a man who perhaps she loved, refused him because she preferred someone else. The Countess Nordston went in search of Korsunsky, who was her partner for the mazurka, and sent him to invite Kitty. Kitty danced in the first figure, and fortunately was not required to talk, because Korsunsky was obliged to be ubiquitous, making his arrangements in his little kingdom. Vronsky and Anna were sitting nearly opposite her. She saw them sometimes near, sometimes at a distance, as their turn brought them into the figures. And as she watched them, she felt more and more certain that her unhappiness was complete. She saw that they felt themselves alone even in the midst of the crowded ballroom. And on Vronsky's face, usually so impassive and calm, she remarked that mingled expression of humility and fear, which strikes one in an intelligent dog, conscious of having done wrong. If Anna smiled, his smile replied. If she became thoughtful, he looked serious. An almost supernatural power seemed to attract Kitty's gaze to Anna's face. She was charming in her simple black velvet. Charming were her round arms, clasped by bracelets. Charming her firm neck, encircled with pearls. Charming her dark, curly locks breaking from restraint. Charming the slow and graceful movements of her small feet and hands. Charming her lovely face, full of animation. But in all this charm there was something terrible and cruel. Kitty admired her more than ever, and ever more and more her pain increased. She felt crushed, and her face told the story. When Vronsky passed her in some figure of the mazurka, he hardly knew her, so much had she changed. "Lovely ball," he said, so as to say something. "Yes," was her reply. Toward the middle of the mazurka, in going through a complicated figure recently invented by Korsunsky, Anna went to the center of the circle and called out 2 gentlemen and 2 ladies. Kitty was one. As she approached Anna, she looked at her in dismay. Anna, half shutting her eyes, looked at her with a smile, and pressed her hand. Then noticing that Kitty's face, replying to her smile, wore an expression of despair and amazement, she turned from her and began to talk to the other lady in animated tones. "Yes, there is some terrible, almost infernal attraction about her," said Kitty to herself. Anna did not wish to remain to supper, but the host insisted. "Do stay, Anna Arkadyevna," said Korsunsky, as she stood with her bare arm resting on the sleeve of his coat. "Such a cotillion I have in mind, un beau jeu." And the master of the house, looking on with a smile, encouraged his efforts to detain her. "No, I cannot stay," said Anna, also smiling, but in spite of her smile the 2 men understood by the determination in her voice that she would not stay. "No, for I have danced here in Moscow at this single ball more than all winter in Petersburg," said she, looking at Vronsky, who was standing near. "One must rest before a journey." "And so you are really going back tomorrow?" he asked. "Yes, I think so," replied Anna, as if surprised at the boldness of his question. But as she said this to him, the brilliancy of her eyes and of her smile set his heart on fire. Anna Arkadyevna did not stay for supper, but took her departure. Chapter 23. Part 1, Chapter 24 of Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy. Translated by Nathan Haskell Doyle. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Marianne Spiegel. Yes, there must be something repellent, even repulsive, about me, thought Levin, as he left the Shtcherbatskys and went on foot in search of his brother. I am not popular with men. They say it is pride. No, I am not proud. If I had been proud, I should not have put myself in my present situation. And he imagined himself Vronsky, happy, popular, calm, witty, who had apparently never put himself in such a terrible position as he was in that evening. Yes, she naturally chose him, and I have no right to complain about any one or anything. I myself am to blame. What right had I to think that she would ever unite her life with mine? Who am I? And what am I? A man useful to no one, a good-for-nothing. Then the memory of his brother Nikolai came back to him. Was he not right in saying that everything in the world was miserable and wretched? Have we been, and are we, just in our judgment of our brother Nikolai? Of course, from the point of view of Prokofy, who saw him drunk and in ragged clothes, he is a miserable creature, but I judge him differently. I know his heart, and I know that we are alike, and I, instead of going to find him, have been out dining, and to this reception. Levin went to a street lamp and read his brother's address, which was written on a slip of paper and called an izvozchik. All the long way he vividly recalled one by one the well-known incidents of his brother Nikolai's life. He remembered how at the university, and for a year after his graduation, he had lived like a monk notwithstanding the ridicule of his comrades, strictly devoted to all forms of religion, services, fasts, turning his back on all pleasures, and especially women. And then how he had suddenly turned around and fallen into the company of people of the lowest lives, and entered upon a course of dissipation and debauchery. He remembered his conduct toward a lad whom he had taken from the country to bring up, and whom he whipped so severely in a fit of anger that he narrowly escaped being transported for mayhem. He remembered his conduct toward a swindler to whom he owed a gambling debt, and in payment of it had given him his note, and whom he had caused to be arrested on the charge of cheating him. This was, in fact, money that Sergei Ivanovitch had just paid. Then he remembered the night spent by Nikolai at the station house on account of a spree. He remembered the scandalous lawsuit against his brother Sergei Ivanovitch, because Sergei had refused to pay his share of their mother's estate. And finally he recalled his last adventure, when after he had gone to take a position at the western frontier, he was dismissed for assaulting a superior. All this was detestable, but it did not seem nearly so odious to Levin as it would have been to those who did not know Nikolai, did not know his history, did not know his heart. Levin remembered how at the time when Nikolai was occupied with his devotions, his fastings, his priests, his ecclesiastical observances, when he was seeking to curb his passionate nature by religion, no one had aided him, but on the contrary, everyone, even himself, had made sport of him. They had mocked him, nicknamed him Noah the monk. Then, when he had fallen, no one had helped him, but all had turned from him with horror and disgust. Levin felt that his brother Nikolai at the bottom of his heart, in spite of all the deformity of his life, was not so very much worse than those who despised him. He was not to blame for having been born with his unrestrainable character and his peculiarities of intellect. He had always had good impulses. I will tell him everything, and I will make him tell me everything, and show him that I love him and therefore understand him, said Levin to himself, and about 11 o'clock in the evening he bade the driver take him to the hotel indicated in the address. Upstairs, numbers 12 and 13, said the Swiss in reply to Levin's question. Is he at home? Probably. The door of number 12 was half open, and from the room came the dense fumes of cheap, poor tobacco, and a voice unknown to Levin was heard speaking. But Levin instantly knew his brother was there. He recognized his cough. When he reached the door, the unknown voice was saying, "All depends on whether the affair is conducted in a proper and rational manner." Konstantin Levin glanced through the doorway and saw that the speaker was a young man in a peasant's sleeveless coat and with an enormous mop of hair on his head. On the divan was sitting a young woman with pock-marked face and dressed in a woolen gown without collar or cuffs. His brother was not to be seen. A pain shot through Konstantin's heart to think of the strange people with whom his brother associated. No one heard him, and, while he was removing his goloshes, he listened to what the man in the sleeveless coat was saying. He was speaking of some enterprise. "Well, the devil take the privileged classes," said his brother's voice after a fit of coughing. "Masha, see if you can get us something to eat and bring some wine if there's any left. If not, go for some." The woman arose, and as she came out from behind the screen she saw Konstantin. "A gentleman here, Nikolai Dmitrich," she cried. "What is wanted?" said the voice of Nikolai Levin angrily. "It's I," replied Konstantin, appearing at the door. "Who's I?" repeated Nikolai's voice, still more angrily. Then he was heard quickly rising and stumbling against something, and Konstantin saw before him at the door his brother's well-known figure, still remarkable by reason of his shyness and ill health, infirm, tall, thin and bent, with great startled eyes. He was still thinner than when Konstantin had last seen him 3 years before. He wore a short overcoat. His hands and his bony frame seemed to him more colossal than ever. His hair was grown thinner, but the same stiff moustaches hid his lips, the same eyes glared at his visitor uncannily and naively. "Ah, Kostya!" he cried suddenly, recognizing his brother, and his eyes shone with joy. But the same instant he fixed his eyes on the younger man and made a quick convulsive motion of his head and neck, as if his cravat choked him, a gesture well known to Konstantin, and an entirely different expression, wild and bitter and expressive of martyrdom, came into his sunken face. "I wrote to both you and Sergey Ivanovitch that I do not know you, nor wish to know you. What do you want? What does either of you want?" He was not at all as Konstantin had imagined him. The hardest and vilest elements of his character, which had made any relations with him difficult, had faded from Konstantin Levin's memory whenever he thought about him. And now, when he saw his face and the characteristic convulsive motions of his head, he remembered it all. "But I wanted nothing of you except to see you," he replied timidly. "I only came to see you." His brother's diffidence apparently disarmed Nikolai. His lips relaxed. "Ah, did you?" said he. "Well, come in. Sit down. Do you want some supper? Masha, bring enough for 3. No, hold on. Do you know who this is?" he asked his brother, pointing to the young man in the peasant coat. "This gentleman is Mr. Kritsky, a friend of mine from Kiev, a very remarkable man. It seems the police are after him because he is not a coward." And he looked, as his habit was, at all who were in the room. Then, seeing that the woman, who stood at the door, was about to leave, he shouted, "Wait, I tell you!" Then, in his extravagant, incoherent manner of speech, which Konstantin knew so well, he began to tell his brother the whole story of Kritsky's life, how he had been driven from the university because he had tried to found an aid society and Sunday schools among the students, how afterwards he had been appointed teacher in one of the public schools, only to be dismissed, and how finally he had been tried for something or other. "Were you at the University of Kiev?" asked Konstantin of Kritsky, in order to break the awkward silence that followed. "Yes, I was at Kiev," replied Kritsky curtly, with a frown. "And this woman," cried Nikolai Levin, pointing to the girl, "is the companion of my life, Marya Nikolaevna. I took her from a house," he said, stretching out his neck, "but I love her, and I esteem her. And all who want to know me," he added, raising his voice and scowling, "must love her and esteem her. She is just the same as my wife, just the same. So now you know with whom you have to do. And if you think that you lower yourself, There's the door." And again his eyes looked at them all questioningly. "I do not understand how I should lower myself." "All right. Masha, bring up enough for 3. Some vodka and wine. No, wait. No matter, though. Go." End of chapter 24. Part 1, Chapter 25 of Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy. Translated by Nathan Haskell Doyle. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Marianne Spiegel. "As you see," continued Nikolai Levin, frowning and speaking with effort. It was evidently hard for him to make up his mind what to do or say. "But do you see?" And he pointed to the corner of the room, where lay some iron bars attached to straps. "Do you see that? That is the beginning of a new work which we are undertaking. The work belongs to a productive labor association." Konstantin scarcely listened. He was looking at his brother's sick, consumptive face, and he grew more and more sorry for him, and he could not compel himself to listen to what his brother was saying about the labor association. He saw that the labor association was only an anchor of safety to keep him from absolute self-abasement. Nikolai went on to say, "You know that capital is crushing the laborer. With us the laboring classes, the muzhiks, bear the whole weight of toil, and no matter how they exert themselves, they can never get above their cattle-like condition. All the profits created by their productive labor, by which they could better their lot and procure for themselves leisure and therefore instruction, all their superfluous profits are swallowed up by the capitalists. And society is so constituted that, the harder they work, the more the proprietors and the merchants fatten at their expense, while they remain beasts of burden still. And this order of things must be changed," said he, in conclusion, and looking questioningly at his brother. "Yes, of course," replied Konstantin, looking at the pink spots which burned in his brother's hallowed cheeks. "And now we are organizing an artel of locksmiths where we will all be in common, work, profits, even the tools." "Where will this artel be situated?" asked Konstantin. "In the village of Vozdremo, government of Kazan." "Yes, but why in a village? In the villages, it seems to me, there is plenty of work. Why associated locksmiths in a village?" "Because the muzhiks are serfs, just as much as they ever were, and you and Sergey Ivanovitch don't like it because we want to free them from this slavery," replied Nikolai, vexed by his brother's question. While he spoke, Konstantin was looking about the melancholy, dirty room. He sighed, and his sigh seemed to make Nikolai still more angry. "I know the aristocratic prejudices of such men as you and Sergey Ivanovitch. I know that he is spending all the strength of his mind in defense of the evils that crush us." "No, but why do you speak of Sergey Ivanovitch?" asked Levin, smiling. "Sergey Ivanovitch! This is why!" cried Nikolai at the mention of Sergey Ivanovitch. "This is why! Yet, what is the good? Tell me this. What did you come here for? You despise all this. Very good. Go away, for God's sake!" he cried, rising from his chair. "Go away! Go away!" "I don't despise anything," said Konstantin gently. "I only refrain from discussing." At this moment Marya Nikolaevna came in. Nikolai looked up at her angrily, but she quickly stepped up to him and whispered a few words in his ear. "I am not well. I become easily irritable," he explained, growing calmer and breathing with difficulty. "And you just spoke to me about Sergey Ivanovitch and his article. It is so rubbishy, so idle, so full of error. How can a man who knows nothing about justice write about it? Have you read his article?" said he, turning to Krisky, and then, going to the table, he brushed off the half-rolled cigarettes so as to clear away a little space. "I have not read it," replied Krisky, gloomily, evidently not wishing to take part in the conversation. "Why?" cried Nikolai, irritably, still addressing Krisky. "Because I don't consider it necessary to waste my time on it." "That is, excuse me, how do you know that it would be a waste of time? For many people this article is inaccessible, because it is above them. But I find it different. I see the thoughts through and through, and know wherein it is weak." No one replied. Krisky slowly arose and took his hat. "Won't you take some lunch? Well, good-bye. Come to-morrow with the locksmith." Krisky had hardly left the room when Nikolai smiled and winked. "He is to be pitied, but I see—" Just at that instant Krisky, calling at the door, interrupted him. "What do you want?" he asked, joining him in the corridor. Left alone with Marya Nikolaevna, Levin said to her, "Have you been long with my brother?" "This is the second year. His health has become very feeble. He drinks a great deal," she said. "What do you mean?" "He drinks vodka, and it is bad for him." "Does he drink too much?" "Yes," said she, timidly looking toward the door where Nikolai Levin was just entering. "What were you talking about?" he demanded with a scowl, and looking from one to the other with angry eyes. "Tell me." "Oh, nothing," replied Konstantin in confusion. "You don't want to answer? All right, don't. But you have no business to be talking with her. She is a girl. You a gentleman," he shouted, craning out his neck. "I see that you have understood everything and judged everything, and you look with grief on the errors of my ways." He went on speaking, raising his voice. "Nikolai Dmitrich, Nikolai Dmitrich," whispered Marya Nikolaevna, coming close to him. "Well, very good, very good. Supper, then? Ah, here it is," he said, seeing a servant entering with a platter. "Here, put it here," he said crossly. Then taking the vodka, he poured himself out a glass and drank it eagerly. "Will you have a drink?" he asked his brother, immediately growing lively. "Well, no more about Sergey Ivanovitch. I am very glad to see you. No matter what people say, we are no longer strangers. Come now, drink. Tell me what you are doing," he said, greedily munching a piece of bread and pouring out a second glass. "How are you living?" "I live alone in the country, as I always have, and busy myself with farming," replied Konstantin, looking with terror at the eagerness with which his brother ate and drank, and trying to hide his impressions. "Why don't you get married?" "I have not come to that yet," replied Konstantin, turning red. "Why so? For me? It's all over. I have wasted my life. This I have said, and always shall say, that if they had given me my share of the estate when I needed it, my whole life would have been different." Konstantin hastened to change the conversation. "Did you know that your Vanyushka is with me at Pokrovskoye as a bookkeeper?" he said. Nikolai craned out his head and wondered. "Yes, tell me what is doing at Pokrovskoye. Is the house just the same, and the birch trees, and our study room? Is Philip, the gardener, still alive? How I remember the summer house and the divan. Just look here. Don't let anything in the house be changed, but hurry up and get married and begin to live as you used to. Then I will come to visit you if your wife will be kind." "Then come back with me now," said Konstantin. "How well we should get on together." "I would come if I knew I should not meet Sergey Ivanovitch." "You will not meet him. I live absolutely independent of him." "Yes, but whatever you say, you must choose between him and me," said Nikolai, looking timorously in his brother's eyes. This timidity touched Konstantin. "If you want to hear my whole confession as to this matter, I will tell you that I take sides neither with you nor with him in your quarrel. You are both in the wrong. But in your case the wrong is external, while in his the wrong is inward." "Ha, ha! Do you understand it? Do you understand it?" cried Nikolai with an expression of joy. "But if you would like to know, personally I value your friendship higher because—" "Why? Why?" Konstantin could not say that it was because Nikolai was wretched and needed his friendship, but Nikolai understood that was the very thing he meant, and frowning darkly, he betook himself to the vodka. "Enough, Nikolai Dmitrich!" cried Marya Nikolaevna, laying her great pudgy hand on the decanter. "Let me alone! Don't bother me, or I'll strike you!" he cried. Marya Nikolaevna smiled with her gentle and good-natured smile, which pacified Nikolai, and she took the vodka. "There! Do you think she does not understand things?" said Nikolai. "She understands this thing better than all you. Isn't there something about her good and gentle?" "Haven't you ever been to Moscow before?" said Konstantin, in order to say something to her. "There now, don't say you, to her. It frightens her. No one said view to her except the justice of the peace when they had her up because she wanted to escape from the house of ill fame where she was. My God, how senseless everything is in this world!" he suddenly exclaimed. "These new institutions, these justices of the peace, the Zemstvo, what abominations!" And he began to relate his experiences with the new institutions. Konstantin listened to him, and the criticisms on the absurdity of the new institutions, which he had himself often expressed, now that he heard them from his brother's lips, seemed disagreeable to him. "We shall understand it all in the next world," he said jestingly. "In the next world? Ouch! I don't like your next world. I don't like it," he repeated, fixing his timid haggard eyes on his brother's face. "And yet it would seem good to go from these abominations, these entanglements, from this unnatural state of things, from myself. But I am afraid of death, horribly afraid of death." He shuddered. "There, drink something. Would you like some champagne? Or would you rather go out somewhere? Let's go and see the gypsies. You know I am very fond of gypsies and Russian songs." His speech had begun to grow thick, and he hurried from one subject to another. Konstantin, with Masha's aid, persuaded him to stay at home, and they put him on his bed completely drunk. Masha promised to write Konstantin in case of need, and to persuade Nikolai Levin to come and live with his brother. Chapter 25. Part 1, Chapter 26 of Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy. Translated by Nathan Haskell Doyle. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Marianne Spiegel. The next forenoon Levin left Moscow, and toward evening was at home. On the journey he talked with those near him in the train about politics, about the new railroads, and, just as in Moscow, he was overcome by the chaos of conflicting opinions, self-dissatisfaction, and a sense of shame. But when he got out at his station and perceived his one-eyed coachman, Ignat, with his kaftan collar turned up, when he saw in the dim light that fell through the station windows his covered sledge and his horses with their tied-up tails, and their harness with its rings and fringes, when Ignat, as he was tucking in the robes, told him all the news of the village, about the coming of the contractor and how Pava the cow had calved, then it seemed to him that the chaos resolved itself a little, and his shame and dissatisfaction passed away. This he felt at the very sight of Ignat and his horses. But as soon as he had put on his sheepskin tulip, which he found in the sleigh, and took his seat in the sleigh comfortably wrapped up, and drove off thinking what arrangements he should have to make in the village, and at the same time examining off the horse, Donskaya, which used to be his saddle horse, a jaded but mettlesome steed, he began to view his experiences in an absolutely different light. He felt himself again, and no longer wished to be a different person. He only wished to be better than he had ever been before. In the first place, he resolved from that day forth that he would never expect extraordinary joys, such as marriage had promised to bring to him, and therefore he would never again despise the present. And, in the second place, he would never allow himself to be led away by low passion, the remembrances of which so tortured him while he was deciding to make his proposal. And lastly, as he thought of his brother Nikolai, he resolved that he would never again forget him, but that he would keep track of him and not let him out of sight, so that he might be in readiness to aid him whenever the evil moment arrived, and that seemed likely to be very soon. Then the conversation about communism, which he had so lightly treated with his brother, came back to him, and made him reflect. A reform of economic conditions seemed to him nonsense, but he always felt the unfair difference between his own superfluity and the poverty of the people, and in order that he might feel perfectly right, he now vowed that though hitherto he had worked hard and lived economically, he would in the future work still harder and permit himself even less luxury than ever. And all this seemed to him so easy to accomplish that, throughout the drive from the station, he was the subject of the pleasantest illusions. With a hearty feeling of hope for a new and better life, he reached home just as the clock was striking 10. From the windows of the room occupied by his old nurse, Agafya Mikhailovna, who fulfilled the functions of housekeeper, the light fell on the snow-covered walk before his house. She was not yet asleep. Kuzma, wakened by her, hurried down, barefooted and sleepy, to open the door. Laska, the setter, almost knocking Kuzma down in her desire to get ahead of him, ran to meet her master and jumped upon him, trying to place her forepaws on his breast. "You are back very soon, Batyushka," said Agafya Mikhailovna. "I was bored, Agafya Mikhailovna. It is good to go visiting, but it's better at home," said he, and he went into his library. The library slowly grew light as the candle that was brought burnt up. The familiar details little by little came into sight: the great antlers, the shelves lined with books, the mirror, the stove with a hole which ought long ago to have been repaired, the ancestral divan, the great table, and on the table an open book, a broken ash-tray, a notebook filled with his writing. As he saw all these things, for a moment the doubt arose in his mind if it would be possible to bring about this new life which he had dreamed of during his journey. All these signs of his past seemed to say to him, "No, thou shalt not leave us, thou shalt not become another, but thou shalt still be as thou hast always been, with thy doubts, thy everlasting self-dissatisfaction, thy idle efforts at reform, thy failures and thy perpetual strivings for a happiness which will never be thine." But while these external objects spoke to him thus, a different voice whispered to his soul, bidding him cease to be a slave to his past, and declaring that a man has every possibility within him. And, listening to this voice, he went to one side of the room where he found 2 40-pound dumbbells, and he began to practice his gymnastic exercises with them, endeavoring to bring himself into a condition of vigor. At the door there was a noise of steps. He hastily put down the dumbbells. The intendant came in and said that, thanks to God, everything was all right, but he confessed that the buckwheat in the new drawing-room had got burnt. This provoked Levin. This new drawing-room he had himself built and partially invented. But the intendant had been entirely opposed to it, and now he announced with ill-concealed triumph that the buckwheat was burnt. Levin was sure that it was because he had neglected the precautions 100 times suggested. He grew angry and reprimanded the intendant. But there was one fortunate and important event. Pava, his best, his most beautiful cow, which he had bought at the cattle show, had calved. "Kuzma, give me my tulip. And you," he said to the intendant, "get a lantern. I will go and see her." The stable for the cattle was immediately behind the house. Crossing the courtyard, where the snow was heaped under the lilac bushes, he stepped up to the stable. As he opened the frosty door, he was met by the warm fumes of manure, and the cows, astonished at the untaught light of the lantern, stirred on their fresh straw. The light fell upon the broad black back of his piebald Holland cow. Berkut, the bull, with a ring in his nose, tried to get to his feet, but changed his mind, and only snorted as they passed by. The beautiful Pava, huge as a hippopotamus, was lying near her calf, snuffing at it, and protecting it against those who would come too close. Levin entered the stall, examined Pava, and lifted the calf, spotted with red and white, on its long awkward legs. Pava began to low with anxiety, but was reassured when the calf was restored to her, and began to lick it with her rough tongue. The calf hid its nose under its mother's side, and frisked its tail. "Bring the light this way, Fyodor, this way," said Levin, examining the calf. "Like its mother, but its color is like the sire's. Very pretty. Long hair and prettily spotted. Vasily Fyodorovitch, isn't it a beauty?" he said, turning to his intendant, forgetting in his joy over the newborn calf the grief caused by the burning of his wheat. "Why should it be homely? But Semyon the contractor was here the day after you left. It will be necessary to come to terms with him, Konstantin Dmitrich," replied the intendant. "I have already spoken to you about the machine." This single phrase brought Levin back to all the details of his enterprise, which was great and complicated. and from the stable he went directly to the office, and after a long conversation with the intendant and Semyon the contractor, he went back to the house, and marched straight up to the drawing room. Chapter 27 Part 1, Chapter 27 of Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy, translated by Nathan Haskell Doyle. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Marianne Spiegel. Levin's house was old and large, but, though he lived there alone, he occupied and warmed the whole of it. He knew that this was ridiculous. He knew that it was bad and contrary to his new plans, but this house was a world in itself to him. It was a world where his father and mother had lived and died. They had lived a life which, for Levin, seemed the ideal of all perfection, and which he dreamed of renewing with his own wife, with his own family. Levin scarcely remembered his mother, but this remembrance was sacred, and his future wife, as he imagined her, was to be the counterpart of the ideally charming and adorable woman, his mother. For him, the love of a woman could not exist outside of marriage, but he imagined the family relationship first, and only afterwards the woman who would be the center of the family. His ideas about marriage were therefore essentially different from those held by the majority of his friends, for whom it was only one of innumerable social affairs. For Levin, it was the most important act of his life, whereon all his happiness depended, and now he must renounce it. When he entered the little parlor where he always took tea, and threw himself into his armchair with a book, while Agafya Mikhailovna brought him his cup, and sat near the window, saying as usual, "Well, I'll sit down, Batyushka," then he felt, strangely enough, that he had not renounced his daydreams, and that he could not live without them. Were it Kitty or another, still it would be. He read his book, had his mind on what he was reading, pausing occasionally to listen to Agafya Mikhailovna's unceasing prattle, but his imagination was all the time filled with those varied pictures of family happiness which hovered before him. He felt that in the depths of his soul some change, some modification, some crystallization was taking place. He listened while Agafya Mikhailovna told how Prokhor had forgotten God, and, instead of buying a horse with the money which Levin had given him, had taken it and gone on a spree, and beaten his wife almost to death. And while he listened he read his book, and again caught the thread of his thoughts, awakened by his reading. It was a book by Tyndall on heat. He remembered his criticisms on Tyndall's self-satisfaction in the cleverness of his management of his experiments and on his lack of philosophical views, and suddenly a happy thought crossed his mind. In 2 years I shall have 2 Holland cows, perhaps Pava herself will still be alive, and possibly a dozen of Berkut's daughters will have been added to the herd, just from these 3. Splendid! And again he picked up his book. Well, very good. Electricity and heat are one and the same thing. But could one quantity take the place of the other in the equations used to settle this problem? No. What then? The bond between all forces of nature is felt, like instinct. When Pava's daughter grows into a cow with red and white spots, what a herd I shall have with those 3. Admirable! And my wife and I will go out with our guests to see the herd come in, and my wife will say, "Kostya and I have brought this calf up just like a child." "How can this interest you so?" the guests will say. "All that interests him interests me also." But who will she be? And he began to think of what happened in Moscow. Well, what is to be done about it? I am not to blame, but now everything will be different. It is foolishness to let one's past life dominate the present. One must struggle to live better, much better. He raised his head and sank into thought. Old Alaska, who had not yet got over her delight at her master's return, had been barking up and down the courtyard. She came into the room, wagging her tail and bringing the freshness of the open air, and thrust her head under his hand and begged for a caress, whining plaintively. She almost talks," said Agafya Mikhailovna. "She is only a dog, but she knows just as well that her master has come home and is sad." "Why sad?" "Da! Don't I see it, batyushka? It's time I knew how to read my masters. Grew up with my masters since they were children. No matter, batyushka, your health is good and your conscience pure." Levin looked at her earnestly, in astonishment that she so divined his thoughts. "And shall I give you some more tea?" said she, and taking the cup, she went out. Laska continued to nestle her head in her master's hand. He caressed her, and then she curled herself up around his feet, like a ring, laying her head on one of her hind paws, and, as proof that all was arranged to suit her, she opened her mouth a little, let her tongue slip out between her aged teeth, and, with a gentle puffing of her lips, gave herself up to beatific repose. Levin followed all of her movements. "So will I," said he to himself. "So will I. No matter. All will be well." Chapter 27. Part 1, Chapter 28 of Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy. Translated by Nathan Haskell Doyle. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Marianne Spiegel. Early on the morning after the ball, Anna Arkadyevna sent her husband a telegram announcing that she was going to leave Moscow that day. "No, I must go," she said to her sister-in-law, in explanation of her change of plan, and her tone signified that she had just remembered something that demanded her instant attention. "No, it would be much better if I could go this morning." Stepan Arkadyevitch did not dine at home, but he agreed to be back at 7 o'clock to escort his sister to the train. Kitty did not put in an appearance, but sent word that she had a headache. Dolly and Anna dined alone with the children and the English governess. Either the children were fickle or they were very sensitive and felt that Anna was not at all as she had been on the day when they had taken so kindly to her, that she no longer cared for them, for they suddenly ceased playing with their aunt, seemed to lose their affection for her, and cared very little that she was going away. Anna spent the whole morning in making the preparations for her departure. She wrote a few notes to her Moscow acquaintances, settled her accounts, and packed. To Dolly especially it seemed that she was not in a happy frame of mind, but in that state of mental agitation which Dolly knew from experience arose, not without excellent reason, from dissatisfaction with herself. After dinner Anna went to her room to dress, and Dolly followed her. "How strange you are today," said Dolly. "I? Do you think so? I am not strange, but I am cross. This is common with me. I should like to have a good cry. It is very silly, but it will pass away," said Anna, speaking quickly and hiding her blushing face in a little bag where she was packing her toilet articles and her handkerchiefs. Her eyes shone with tears which she could hardly keep back. "I was so loath to come away from Petersburg, and now I don't want to go back." "You came here and you did a lovely thing," said Dolly, attentively observing her. Anna looked at her with eyes wet with tears. "Don't say that, Dolly. I have done nothing and could do nothing. I often ask myself why people say things to spoil me. What have I done? What could I do? You found that your heart had enough love left to forgive. Without you, God knows what would have been. How fortunate you are, Anna," said Dolly. "All is serene and pure in your soul. Everyone has a skeleton in his closet, as the English say." "What skeleton have you, pray? In you everything is so serene." "I have mine," cried Anna suddenly, and an unexpected, crafty, mocking smile hovered over her lips in spite of her tears. "Well, in your case the skeleton must be a droll one and not grievous," replied Dolly with a smile. "No, it is grievous. Do you know why I go today and not tomorrow? This is a confession which weighs me down, but I wish to make it," said Anna decidedly, sitting down in an armchair and looking Dolly straight in the eyes. And to her astonishment she saw that Anna was blushing, even to her ears, even to the dark curls that played around the back of her neck. "Yes," Anna proceeded, Do you know why Kitty did not come to dinner? She is jealous of me. I spoiled. It was through me that the ball last night was a torment and not a joy to her. But truly, truly, I was not to blame, or not much to blame," she said, with a special accent on the word "немножко," not much. "Oh, how exactly you said that like Stiva!" remarked Dolly, laughing. Anna was vexed. "Oh, no, I am not like Stiva," said she, frowning. "I have told you this simply because I do not allow myself, for an instant, to doubt myself." But the very moment that she said these words she perceived how untrue they were. She not only doubted herself, but she felt such emotion at the thought of Vronsky that she took her departure sooner than she otherwise would, so that she might not meet him again. "Yes, Stiva told me that you danced the mazurka with him, and that he. You cannot imagine how ridiculously it turned out. I thought only to help along the match, and suddenly it went exactly opposite. Perhaps against my will, I." She blushed and did not finish her sentence. "Oh, these things are felt instantly," said Dolly. "I should be in despair if I felt that there was anything serious on his part," interrupted Anna. "But I am convinced that all this will be quickly forgotten, and that Kitty will not long be angry with me." "In the first place, Anna, to tell the truth, I should not be very sorry if this marriage fell through. It would be vastly better for it to stop right here if Vronsky can fall in love with you in a single day." "Oh, heavens! That would be so idiotic!" said Anna, and again an intense blush of satisfaction overspread her face at hearing the thought that occupied her expressed in words. "And that is why I go away, after making an enemy of Kitty, whom I love so dearly. Oh, how sweet she is! But you will arrange that, Dolly, won't you?" Dolly could hardly refrain from smiling. She loved Anna, but it was pleasant to her to discover that she also had her weaknesses. "An enemy? That cannot be." "And I should have been so glad to have you all love me as I love you. But now I love you all the more than ever," said Anna, with tears in her eyes. "Oh, how absurd I am today!" She passed her handkerchief over her eyes and began to get ready. At the very moment of her departure came Stepan Arkadyevitch with rosy, happy face and an odor of wine and cigars. Anna's tender-heartedness had communicated itself to Dolly, and, when she kissed her for the last time, she whispered, "Think, Anna, what you have done for me. I shall never forget. And remember that I love you, and always shall love you as my best friend." "I don't understand why," replied Anna, kissing her and struggling with her tears. "You have understood me, and you do understand me. Farewell, my dearest." End of chapter 28. Part 1, Chapter 29 of Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy. Translated by Nathan Haskell Doyle. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Marianne Spiegel. "Well, all is over, and thank the Lord," was Anna's first thought after she had said good-bye to her brother, who had blocked up the entrance to the railway carriage even after the third bell had rung. She sat down on the divanchik next Annushka, her maid, and began to examine the feebly lighted compartment. "Thank the Lord! Tomorrow I shall see Seroza and Alexey Alexandrovitch, and my good and commonplace life will begin again as of old." With the same mental preoccupation that had possessed her all that day, Anna found a satisfaction in attending minutely to the arrangements for the journey. With her skillful little hands she opened her red bag and took out a cushion, placed it on her knees, wrapped her feet warmly, and composed herself comfortably. A lady, who seemed to be an invalid, had already gone to sleep. Two other ladies entered into conversation with Anna, and a fat elderly dame, well wrapped up, expressed her opinion on the temperature. Anna exchanged a few words with the ladies, but, not taking any interest in their conversation, asked Annushka for her traveling lamp, placed it on the back of her seat, and took from her bag a paper cutter and an English novel. At first she could not read. The going and coming and the general bustle disturbed her. When once the train had started, she could not help listening to the noises, the snow striking against the window and sticking to the glass, the conductor, as he passed, with the snowflakes melting on his coat, the remarks about the terrible storm, all distracted her attention. Afterwards it became more monotonous, always the same jolting and jarring, the same snow on the window, the same sudden changes from warmth to cold, and back to warmth again, the same faces in the dim light, and the same voices. And Anna began to read, and to follow what she was reading. Annushka was already asleep, holding the little red bag on her knees with great, clumsy hands clad in gloves, one of which was torn. Anna read, and understood what she read, but it was not pleasant to her to read, in other words, to enter into the lives of other people. She had too keen a desire to live herself. If she read how the heroine of her story took care of the sick, she would have liked to go with noiseless steps into the sick room. If she read how a member of Parliament made a speech, she would have liked to make that speech. If she read how Lady Mary rode after the hounds, and made sport of her sister-in-law, and astonished everyone by her audacity, she would have liked to do the same. But she could do nothing, and with her little hands she clutched the paper-cutter, and forced herself to read calmly. The hero of her novel had reached the summit of his English ambition, a baronetcy and an estate, and Anna felt a desire to go with him to this estate, when suddenly it seemed to her that he ought to feel a sense of shame, and that she ought to share it. But why should he feel ashamed? Why should I feel ashamed? She asked herself with astonishment and discontent. She closed the book, and, leaning back against the chair, held the paper-cutter tightly in both hands. There was nothing to be ashamed of. She reviewed all her memories of her visit to Moscow. They were all pleasant and good. She remembered the ball. She remembered Vronsky and his humble and passionate face. She recalled all her relations with him. There was nothing to be ashamed of. But at the same time, in these reminiscences, the sense of shame kept growing stronger and stronger, and it seemed to her that inward voice, whenever she thought of Vronsky, seemed to say, warmly, very warmly, passionately, "Well, what is this?" she asked herself resolutely, as she changed her position in the seat. "What does this mean? Am I afraid to face these memories? Well, what is it? Can there be, any relationship between that boy officer and me beyond what exists between all acquaintances?" She smiled disdainfully, and again took up her book. But now she really could not any longer comprehend what she was reading. She rubbed her paper-cutter over the pane, and then pressed its cool, smooth surface to her cheek, and then she almost laughed out loud with the joy that unreasonably took possession of her. She felt her nerves grow more and more tense, like the strings on some musical instrument screwed up to the last degree. She felt her eyes open wider and wider. Her fingers and her toes twitched nervously. Something seemed to choke her, and all objects and sounds in the wavering semi-darkness surprised her by their exaggerated proportions. She kept having moments of doubt as to whether they were going backwards or forwards, or if the train had come to a stop. Was it Annushka there, sitting next to her, or was it a stranger? What is that on the hook? My fur shuba, or an animal? And what am I doing here? Am I myself, or someone else? It was terrible to her to yield to these hallucinations, but something kept attracting her to them, and she could by her own will either yield to them or withdraw from them. In order to regain possession of herself, Anna arose, took off her plaid, and laid aside her pelerine of thick cloth. For a moment she thought that she had conquered herself, for when a tall, thick muzhik, dressed in a long nankeen overcoat, which lacked a button, came in, she recognized in him the stove-tender. She saw him look at the thermometer, and noticed how the wind and the snow came blowing in as he opened the door, and then everything became confused again. The tall peasant began to draw fantastic figures on the wall. The old lady seemed to stretch out her legs and fill the whole carriage as with a black cloud. Then she thought she heard terrible thumping and rapping, a noise like something tearing. Then a red and blinding fire flashed in her eyes, and then all vanished in darkness. Anna felt as if she was falling, but this was not at all alarming, but rather pleasant. The voice of a man all wrapped up and covered with snow shouted something in her ear. She sat up, recovered her wits, and perceived that they were approaching a station, and the man was the conductor. She bade Annushka give her the pelerine which she had laid aside, and her handkerchief, and, having put them on, she went to the door. "Do you wish to go out?" asked Annushka. "Yes, I want to get a breath of fresh air. It is very hot here." And she opened the door. The snowstorm and the wind rushed in to meet her and disputed the door with her. And this seemed to her very jolly. The storm seemed to be waiting for her. It gaily whistled and was eager to carry her away. But she clung to the cold railing with one hand, and, holding her dress, she stepped out on the platform and left the car. The wind was fierce on the steps, but on the platform, under the shelter of the station, it was calmer, and she found a genuine pleasure in filling her lungs with the frosty air. Standing near the car she watched the platform and the station gleaming with lights. End of chapter 29. Part 1, Chapter 30 of Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy, translated by Nathan Haskell Doyle. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Marianne Spiegel. A furious snowstorm was raging and whistling among the wheels of the carriages, around the columns, and into the corners of the station. The carriages, the pillars, the people, everything visible, were covered on one side with snow, and it was increasing momently. Once in a while there would be a lull, but then again it blew with such gusts that it seemed impossible to make way against it. Meantime a few people were running hither and thither, talking gaily, opening and shutting the great doors of the station, and making the platform planks creak under their feet. The flitting shadow of a man passed rapidly by her feet, and she heard the blows of a hammer falling on the iron. "Send off the telegram!" cried an angry voice on the other side of the track in the midst of the drifting storm. "This way, please, number 28," cried other voices, and several people covered with snow hurried by. Two gentlemen, with lighted cigarettes in their mouths, passed near Anna. She was just about to re-enter the carriage, after getting one more breath of fresh air, and had already taken her hand from her muff to lay hold of the railing, when the flickering light from the reflector was cut off by a man in a military coat, who came close to her. She looked up, and that instant recognized Vronsky's face. Raising his hand to his visor, he bowed low, and asked if she needed anything, if he might not be of service to her. She looked at him for a considerable time without replying, and although he was in the shadow, she saw, or thought she saw, the expression of his face, and even of his eyes. It was a repetition of that respectful admiration which had so impressed her on the evening of the ball. More than once that day she had said to herself that Vronsky, for her, was only one of the 100 young men whom one meets in society, that she would never permit herself to give him a second thought. But now, on the first instant of seeing him again, a sensation of pride and joy seized her. She had no need to ask why he was there. She knew, as truly as if he had told her, that he was there so as to be where she was. "I did not know that you were going to Petersburg. Why are you going?" said she, letting her hand fall from the railing. A joy which she could not restrain shone in her face. "Why am I going?" he repeated, looking straight into her eyes. "You know that I came simply for this, to be where you are," he said. "I could not do otherwise." And at this instant the wind, as if it had conquered every obstacle, blew the snow from the roofs of the carriages, and whirled away a piece of sheet iron which it had torn off, and at the same time the deep whistle of the locomotive gave a melancholy, mournful cry. Never had the horror of a tempest appeared to her more beautiful than now. He had said what her heart longed to hear, but what her better judgment condemned. She made no reply, but he perceived by her face how she fought against herself. "Forgive me if what I said displeases you," he murmured humbly. He spoke respectfully, courteously, but in such a resolute, decided tone that for some time she was unable to reply. "What you said was wrong, and I beg of you, if you are a gentleman, to forget it, as I shall forget it," she said at last. "I shall never forget, and I shall never be able to forget any of your words, any of your gestures. Enough, enough!" she cried, vainly endeavouring to give an expression of severity to her face, at which Vronsky was passionately gazing. And grasping the cold railing, she mounted the steps and quickly entered the vestibule of the carriage. But she stopped in the little vestibule, and tried to recall to her imagination what had taken place. But though she found it impossible to remember either her own words or his, she instinctively felt that this brief conversation had brought them frightfully close together, and that she was at once alarmed and delighted. After she had stood there a few seconds, she went back into the carriage and sat down in her place. The nervous strain which had been tormenting her not only returned, but became more intense, until she began to fear every moment that something would snap her brain. She did not sleep all night, but in this nervous tension, and in the fantasies which filled her imagination, there was nothing disagreeable or painful. On the contrary, it was joyous, burning excitement. Toward morning Anna dozed as she sat in her armchair, and when she awoke it was broad daylight, and the train was approaching Petersburg. Instantly the thought of her home, her husband, her son, and all the labours of the day and the coming days filled her mind. The train had hardly reached the station at Petersburg when Anna stepped out on the platform, and the first person that she saw was her husband waiting for her. "Oh, good heavens! Why do his ears stand out so?" she thought, as she looked at his reserved and portly figure, and especially at his stiff cartilaginous ears, which, as they propped out the rim of his round hat, struck her for the first time. When he saw her, he came to meet her at the carriage, compressing his lips into his habitual smile of irony, looking straight at her with his great weary eyes. A disagreeable thought made her heart sink when she saw his stubborn, weary look. She felt that she had expected to find him different. Especially was she astonished by the feeling of self-dissatisfaction which she experienced on meeting him. This feeling was associated with her home, akin to the state of hypocrisy which she recognized in her relations with her husband. This feeling was not novel. She had felt it before without heeding it, but now she realized it clearly and painfully. "There, you see, I am a tender husband, tender as the first year of our marriage. I was burning with desire to see you," said he, in his slow, deliberate voice, and with the light tone of raillery that he generally used in speaking to her, a tone of ridicule of any one who should really say such things. "Is Serosa well?" she asked. "And is this all the reward," he said, "for my ardour?" "He is well, very well." Chapter 30. Part 1, Chapter 31 of Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy, translated by Nathan Haskell Doyle. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Marianne Spiegel. Vronsky also had not even attempted to sleep all that night. He sat in his armchair, now gazing straight forward, now looking at those who came in and went out, and if before he had impressed strangers and irritated them by his imperturbable dignity, now he would have seemed to them far more haughty and self-contained. He looked at men as if they were things. A nervous young man, employed in the district court, was sitting opposite him in the carriage, and came to hate him on account of this aspect. The young man asked for a light, and spoke to him, and even touched him, in order to make him perceive that he was not a thing but a man. Yet Vronsky looked at him exactly as he looked at the carriage lamp. And the young man made a grimace, feeling that he should lose command of himself to be so scorned by a man. Vronsky saw nothing, saw no one. He felt as if he were a Tsar, not because he believed that he had made an impression upon Anna, he did not fully realize that as yet, but because the impression which she had made on him filled him with happiness and pride. What would be the outcome of all this he did not know and did not even consider, but he felt that all his hitherto dissipated and scattered powers were now concentrating and converging with frightful rapidity toward one beatific focus. And he was happy in this thought. He knew only that he had told her the truth when he said he was going where she was, that all the happiness of life, the sole significance of life, he found now in seeing and hearing her. And when he left his compartment at Bologovo to get a glass of seltzer, and he saw Anna, involuntarily his first word told her what he thought. And he was glad that he had spoken as he did, glad that she knew all now and was thinking about it. He did not sleep all night. Returning to his carriage, he did not cease recalling all his memories of her, the words that she had spoken, and in his imagination glowed the pictures of a possible future which overwhelmed his heart. When, on reaching Petersburg, he left the carriage, after his sleepless night, he felt as fresh and vigorous as if he had just had a cold bath. He stood near his carriage, waiting to see her pass. "Once more I shall see her," he said to himself with a smile. "I shall see her graceful bearing, her face. She will speak a word to me, will turn her head, will look at me. Perhaps she will smile on me." But it was her husband whom first he saw, politely escorted through the crowd by the station master. Oh, yes, the husband. And then Vronsky for the first time clearly realized that the husband was an important factor in Anna's life. He knew that she had a husband, but he had not realized his existence, and he now fully realized it only as he saw his head and shoulders, and his legs clothed in black trousers, and especially when he saw this husband unconcernedly take her hand with an air of proprietorship. When he saw Alexey Alexandrovitch, with his Petersburgish fresh face, and his solid, self-confident figure, his round hat, his slightly stooping shoulders, he began to believe in his existence, and he experienced an unpleasant sensation, such as a man tormented by thirst might experience, who should discover a fountain, but find that a dog, a sheep, or a pig has been drinking and fouling the water. Alexey Alexandrovitch's stiff and heavy gait was exceedingly distasteful to Vronsky. He would not acknowledge that anyone besides himself had the right to love Anna. But she was still the same, and the sight of her had still the same effect on him, physically kindling him, stirring him, and filling his heart with joy. He ordered his German body servant, who came hurrying up to him from the second-class carriage, to see to the baggage and to go home, and he himself went to her. Thus he witnessed the first meeting between husband and wife, and with a lover's intuition perceived the shade of constraint with which Anna spoke to her husband. No, she does not love him, and she cannot love him, was his mental judgment. Even as he came up to Anna Arkadyevna from behind, he noticed with joy that she felt him near her and looked round, and having recognized him, she went on talking with her husband. "Did you pass a good night?" he inquired, bowing to her and her husband, and allowing Alexey Alexandrovitch the opportunity to accept the honor of the salutation, and recognize him, or not recognize him, as it might seem good to him. "Thank you, very good," she replied. Her face expressed weariness, lacked that spark of animation which was generally hovering now in her eyes, now in her smile. But, for a single instant, at the sight of Vronsky, something flashed into her eyes, and, notwithstanding the fact that the fire instantly died away, he was overjoyed even at this. She raised her eyes to her husband to see whether he knew Vronsky. Alexey Alexandrovitch looked at him with displeasure, vaguely remembering who he was. Vronsky's calm self-assurance struck upon Alexey Alexandrovitch's cool superciliousness as a scythe strikes a rock. "Count Vronsky," said Anna. "Ah, we have met before, it seems to me," said Alexey Alexandrovitch with indifference, extending his hand. Went with the mother and came home with the son," said he, speaking with precision, as if his words were worth a rouble apiece. "I presume you are returning from a furlough?" And without waiting for an answer he turned to his wife, in his ironical tone. "Did they shed many tears at Moscow on your leaving them?" By thus addressing his wife he intended to give Vronsky to understand that he desired to be left alone, and again bowing to him, he touched his hat. But Vronsky had one more word to say to Anna. "I hope I have the honor of calling on you," said he. Alexey Alexandrovitch, with weary eyes, looked at Vronsky. "Very happy," he said coldly. "We receive on Mondays." Then, leaving Vronsky entirely, he said to his wife, still in a jesting tone, "And how fortunate that I happen to have a spare half-hour to come to meet you and show you my affection." "You emphasize your affection too much for me to appreciate it," she replied, in the same spirit of raillery, involuntarily listening to Vronsky's steps behind them. "But what is that to me?" she asked herself in thought. Then she began to ask her husband how Serosa had got along during her absence. "Oh, excellently. Mariette says that he has been very good, and I am sorry to mortify you. He did not seem to miss you, not so much as your husband did. But again, merci, my dear, that you came a day earlier. Our dear Samovar will be delighted." He called the celebrated Countess Lidia Ivanovna by the nickname Samovar, because, like a tea-urn, she was always and everywhere bubbling and boiling. "She has kept asking after you, and do you know, if I make bold to advise you, you would do well to go see her today. You see, her heart is always sore about something. At present, besides her usual cares, she is greatly concerned about the reconciliation of Yablonskys." The Countess Lidia Ivanovna was a friend of Anna's husband, and the center of a certain clique in Petersburg society, to which Anna on her husband's account, rather than for any other reason, belonged. "Yes, but didn't I write her?" "She must have all the details. Go to her, my love, if you are not too tired. Well, Kondraty will call your carriage, and I am going to a committee meeting. I shall not have to dine alone today," continued Alexey Alexandrovitch, not in jest this time. "You cannot imagine how used I am to—" And with a peculiar smile, giving her a long pressure of the hand, he conducted her to the carriage. Chapter 31. Part 1, Chapter 32 of Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy, translated by Nathan Haskell Doyle. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Marianne Spiegel. The first person to meet Anna when she reached home was her son. He darted downstairs, in spite of his governess's reproof, and with a wild delight called, "Mamma! Mamma!" Rushing up to her, he threw his arms around her neck. "I told you it was Mamma!" he shouted to the governess. "I knew it was!" But the son, no less than the husband, awakened in Anna a feeling of disillusion. She imagined him better than he was in reality. She was obliged to descend to the reality in order to look on him as he was. But in fact, he was lovely, with his fair curls, his blue eyes, and his pretty plump legs in their neatly fitting stockings. She felt an almost physical satisfaction in feeling him near her, and in his caresses, and a moral calm in looking into his tender, confiding, loving eyes, and in hearing his innocent questions. She unpacked the gifts sent him by Dolly's children, and told him how there was a little girl in Moscow named Tanya, and how this Tanya knew how to read, and was teaching the other children to read. "Am I not as good as she?" asked Serosa. "For me, you are worth all the rest of the world." "I know it," said Serosa, smiling. Anna had not finished drinking her coffee when the Countess Lidia Ivanovna was announced. The Countess Lidia Ivanovna was a tall, stout woman with an unhealthy, sallow complexion and handsome, dreamy black eyes. Anna liked her, but today, as if for the first time, she saw her with all her faults. "Well, my dear, did you carry the olive branch?" demanded the Countess Lidia Ivanovna as she entered the room. "Yes, it is all made up," replied Anna. "But it was not so bad as we thought. As a general thing, My sister-in-law is too peremptory." But the Countess Lydia, who was interested in everything that did not specially concern herself, had the habit of sometimes not heeding what did not interest her. She interrupted Anna. "Well, this world is full of woes and tribulations, and I am all worn out to-day." "What is it?" asked Anna, striving to repress a smile. "I am beginning to weary of the ineffectual attempts to get at the truth, and sometimes I am utterly discouraged. The work of the Little Sisters," this was a philanthropic and religiously patriotic institution, "used to get along splendidly, but there is nothing to be done with these men," added the Countess Lydia Ivanovna, with an air of ironical resignation to fate. "They got hold of the idea, they mutilated it, and then they judge it so meanly, so wretchedly. 2 or 3 men, your husband among them, understand all the significance of this work, but the others only discredit it. Yesterday I had a letter from Pravdin." Pravdin was a famous Panslavist who lived abroad, and the Countess Lydia Ivanovna related what he had said in his letter. Then she went on to describe the troubles and snares that blocked the work of uniting the churches, and finally departed in haste, because it was the day for her to be present at the meeting of some society or other, and at the sitting of the Slavonic Committee. "All this is just as it has been. But why did I never notice it before?" said Anna to herself. "Was she very irritable to-day? But at any rate, it is ridiculous. Her aims are charitable. She is a Christian, and yet she is angry with everyone, and everyone is her enemy. And yet all her enemies are working for Christianity and charity." After the departure of the Countess Lydia Ivanovna came a friend, the wife of a director, who told her all the news of the city. At 3 o'clock she went out, promising to be back in time for dinner. Alexey Alexandrovitch was at the meeting of the ministry. The hour before dinner, which Anna spent alone, she employed sitting with her son, who had his dinner by himself, in arranging her things, and in reading and answering the letters and notes heaped up on her writing table. The sense of causeless shame, and the agitation from which she had suffered so strangely during her journey, now completely disappeared. Under the conditions of her ordinary everyday life, she felt calm and free from reproach, and she was filled with wonder as she recalled her condition of the night before. What was it? Nothing. Vronsky said a foolish thing. It is easy to put an end to such nonsense, and I answered him exactly right. To speak of it to my husband is unnecessary and impossible. To speak about it would seem to attach importance to what has none. And she recalled how, when a young subordinate of her husband's in Petersburg had almost made her a declaration, and she had told him about it, Alexey Alexandrovitch answered that as she went into society, she, like all society women, might expect such experiences, but that he had perfect confidence in her tact, and never would permit himself to humiliate her or him by jealousy. Why tell then? Besides, thank God, there is nothing to tell. End of chapter 32.